Okay, today is Friday, July 21st,
Yes.
2017.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And Mama's going to tell us the story about her spiritual life and how she came to know the Lord and Dad and the family and all that good stuff. So you want to just begin?
Yeah. I was born. I was born in Jamaica, West Indies, June 28, 1933. And I lived there until 1952. August of 1952, when I came here to college, to Hunter College in New York City. We were nominal believers.
Kind of church did you go to?
We went to Episcopal Church, the Anglican Church in Jamaica, and it's called Episcopal Church here. So when I came here, I came to my uncle and his family in Long Island. We didn't go to church. We just lived like millions of others, saying we're Christians. But I remember when I was a child, when I was confirmed, which I guess when I was 12 or 13, the Episcopal priest who confirmed me, who taught me, I had a class on it. I think he talked about something happening, that God was going to come into my life. Because I remember after the confirmation, sitting and waiting for something to happen to me. I didn't know what, but I felt as if something was going to happen, and it didn't. So I came here and I finished college, married Earl in 1956. And we were part of the first post-war generation that were going to make it big. And Earl was in early electronics, and he progressed very quickly. He was a go-getter. He said God helps those who help themselves. So he helped himself. And we went to the Episcopal Church every now and then. I worked just off of Wall Street, pretty much where the Twin Towers were eventually built. That's where I worked. I worked as a secretary, private secretary to the treasurer of a blue chip company. That means it was a mining company, and it was a big one in those days. I don't think it exists anymore. And then we had kids. We were living in the city, in the Bronx, and Dawn was first born in 58, and Richard came in 60. And then we followed the trek to the suburbs. We were the first ones to really go as a group out into the suburbs. And we were living at that time in the Bronx, New York. And so we moved across the Hudson River into Nanuet, New York. Steve was born there, 64. And we went to church. We were churchgoers. And then a new priest came to the Episcopal Church that we belonged to. And he introduced something called Bible study. And I had never studied the Bible before. I thought the Bible was only supposed to be read in church. So I got interested. But there was no movement towards Jesus. That was not the idea. The idea was just to study the Bible. It was not a spiritual journey, really. And we used to go out in summer, for the summer vacation, to Cape Cod. That's in Massachusetts, out to the ocean. And in those days, we all rented campers or bought a camper and went to a campground and camped. And one year in the early 70s, 1970s, we had settled into a campground, into a spot, and the kids were running around, and this family came and they needed help, and Earl helped them set up their camper and everything else, so we got friendly with them. But she was different from anybody I'd ever met. She would sit and read, and when I went to see what book it was the Bible. And I had never ever met anybody who really read the Bible. And at night, what usually happened was the kids would just, we just have a fun time in the campground. The kids go running around and, had campfires and things. But they would all go into their camper and not come out. They had 3 kids, my kids' age. So I said, what do you do in your camper all that time? It's not that big. It's not, no TV, no nothing like what we have now. And she said, we have family devotions. Well, I'd never heard of family devotions. So that began my journey. It was, I began to think about these things, and Bible study began, when I went back to church and back home, Bible study began to have more importance to me. I found myself crying over Bible passages. I didn't know why. And this person that I met at the campground, her name was Ellie Jordan. And every Christmas, Ellie would send a Christmas letter. In those days, Christmas letters were our way of communicating. And in the Christmas letter, she always told us all the great things that Jesus did for her and what she did. And she went and talked about Jesus. She led people to Jesus. And it was always Jesus. And we kind of poke fun at that. We called her Crazy Ellie. And we'd wait for her Christmas letters and read them and laugh. Here she goes again, talking about Jesus. And one year she enclosed a tract. For those who don't know what a tract is, it's a little bifold that tells you about God and about Jesus, what Jesus did for you, and invite you to come to know him. So she sent us this tract, and for some reason, I didn't throw it away. I took it up to my bedroom and I put it somewhere, put it away, because I didn't want anybody to know that I had Crazy Ellie's, whatever that was called. I didn't know it was a tract in those days. And things kind of got a little hairy in our family. My husband was busy with his job and traveling. He traveled most of the time. So I was stuck with 3 kids. And I was working. By that time, I was a teacher. After Steve got to be about 4 or 5, I went back and I was a teacher, elementary school teacher. And I was not having much success juggling work and home. It was a nightmare to me. I was never supposed to have done that. And this was when women first went out to work again. It was the early 60s. Well, no, it was the late 60s. Early 70s, I'm sorry. And that's when the push for women to go into the workplace, and everybody felt the pressure. Like, what are you doing home? That's a waste of time. You're supposed to be working. So, but I found that it was very difficult for me to teach children and do a good job there, and then come home and take care of children. It was really difficult, and as the kids got to teenage years, it got more difficult. And I was, with Earl gone, I was in charge, and he would expect me, he had rules and things that he'd expect me to carry out, to make sure the kids did it, and I couldn't. So during the week, it was kind of hairy in our house. But when Daddy came home, we were all on our best behavior. And we were living in Connecticut by then, in a nice house. You know, we'd done the thing everybody does, move up, and it was a 4-bedroom, 2-story house, and in a very quiet suburb. And in New England, they used to give February vacations because everybody went skiing in February. Well, we didn't go skiing. I was too busy working, and so we were home. So we were stuck home with the snow and the ice and the slush and the kids. And so sometime, it was during February vacation that I got pretty low. I'm not suicidal in general. I never think of suicide. I'm too much of a coward. I couldn't do it. But I was feeling pretty much of a failure, and as a wife and as a mother. And so I went up to my bedroom to get away. It's the only place I had. And sitting on my dresser was Crazy Ellie's track. I didn't put it there. I don't know how it got there. And I said, maybe I need to read this. But I just couldn't read it in my bedroom because the kids might break in and see me reading Crazy Ellie's thing and laugh at me. That's what I was thinking. So I went into the bathroom and locked the door, sat in the toilet, and read it. And it was kind of a silly one. It said, well, it spoke exactly to me because at that time in my life, I had to have a clean house. I wouldn't invite anybody in unless my house was sparkling clean, at least what they could see. And so what the track said was that we know you feel that the house of your life is very dirty. I said to myself, yeah, dirty, so, failure, no good, whatever. But Jesus is knocking on the door of your heart, of your life. Just let him into the entranceway, which you keep clean, so in case anybody comes in. And I literally said, Jesus, you may come into the entryway of my life. That's it. Can't go any further. It's too dirty. I didn't know what I did. I didn't change. Nothing changed. It was not a lightning bolt experience. But God never stops. He sent a Southern Baptist lady. We didn't even know what Southern Baptists were. And they sent her husband was transferred up from the South, up to Connecticut, up to our area. And she says God told her to go to the Episcopal Church because they needed a Southern Baptist. And so we were driving somewhere one day, and she said, June, are you born again? I said, born again? What is that? Never heard of it. She says, well, have you ever asked Jesus into your heart? So I told her my story. She says, you're born again. So I said, oh, I'm born again. Didn't know much. I went home and told my husband I was born again. And he put it on a medal, like a medal on his chest. Because everywhere he went, he told everybody he had a born again wife. And but the interesting thing is that same lady, Lynn, who really introduced me to Jesus, told me that, that they were having a luncheon with a Christian woman in the town. And it just happened that I had just retired from teaching. I just could not teach anymore. I just could not go back to school. I couldn't face it. So I retired that summer, and it was right after school started. They're having a luncheon at her home, and they're having the leading Catholic charismatic lady in town speak. But, I thought maybe she was a pope or something. I didn't know what all this meant. So I went to the luncheon, and I sat beside this sweet woman who was talking, and she told me about a Bible study that was starting close to my home, about a mile away. I said, Bible study? Yeah, I need a Bible study. I need something, because I wasn't getting it at the Episcopal Church. Well, it turns out she was the leading Catholic charismatic lady in town, Pam, who has since become one of my best friends. So that really started my journey. That really started my journey with the Lord, because all of a sudden I was studying under an incredible woman called Dale, who her husband also was transferred to the area, and she was a Protestant who converted to a Catholic because her husband was Catholic. And when she came to the town, my town, she says the Lord told her to go to the priest his name was Father Hostillo, and he was very hostile. I don't think he ever talked to a Protestant. He just did. Not that he was prejudiced, he just didn't talk to Protestants. He was Catholic. And she went to him and she knocked on his door and he let her in, and she said, Father Hostillo, the Lord has sent me to have a Bible study. And he said yes. And he never came to oversee her. He never asked for what she was teaching. It was and she just taught from Genesis. She just taught from the Bible. So that began my journey, and naturally I learned what it meant to be born again. And at that point, that's the change that came in my life. I became a raving a maniac for Jesus. If I needed it, everybody needed him, and I'd love Christmas because I'd buy something and go to the register, the cashier, and before I check out with you, I need to ask you a question. Do you know Jesus? I would just have to do this with everybody, and naturally I had to do it with my husband, who, being a man, didn't like to be told what to do. And he didn't respond he thought he was pretty good. He's a pretty good Christian. He had it all set up. There were a level of 10 sins, 1 through 10. And somehow, if you did up to 8, you're fine with God. It was a 9 and 10 that was bad, and he never did 9 and 10. So he was good with God. In the meantime, I am becoming friends with all of these charismatic. That was the time when the charismatic movement really had started in late 60s, early 70s, meaning the gifts of the Holy Spirit. being aware that the Holy Spirit is alive and a part of the Godhead and works and gifts of healing and speaking in tongues and things like that. All of these, that's what all these people were. That's what we all were. We thought that was, well, we knew that was okay. Because we just were happy. We loved it. And he was not interested in anything like that. He was a good Episcopalian, and he was not interested. You want to go on, right? I did everything. I laid my hands on his pillow. I put scripture under the mattress. Oh, I did everything. I would sit in bed and read the Bible and say, "Oh, isn't this wonderful?" And one night I came up to bed, and he loved Shakespeare. He had all of Shakespeare books on different plays. And on my side of the bed, it was open to the Shakespeare play, The Taming of the Shrew. I got the message. I guess I got the message, but I became involved with the women's group called Women's Aglow, and we had monthly meetings. And then there was something called Full Gospel Businessmen, and that does not exist anymore. But Women's Aglow still exists, and all the men, the husbands of my friends, would go, and they were all leaders and everything in it. And it was my desire, oh God, please, everything in the Word that I read, I try to put Earl in there, my husband, I just want him to come to know you. And so they also had meetings but at night, and they had dinners. So I said, honey, there's a men's group. It's run by men, and we go to dinner, and then they have a speaker afterwards, and then we leave. Well, I'll go, he said, but I'm sitting right beside the door, and I'm leaving when I feel like. Because he never liked to be penned in. He liked freedom. That's just the way he was. He just liked freedom. So we went to the first meeting, and my friends' husbands and my friends and their husbands had conspired, because they knew Earl was he was engineer. He worked with engineers, and so they chose one of the men who was an engineer, Joe. He was going to go over and talk to Earl. In the meantime, the woman would all come around and hold me down, pray for me and talk to me and keep me. And so he stayed that meeting. He didn't leave, but he didn't raise his hands. All the men were raising their hands and praising God, but he kept going. He kept going back to the meetings. And I said, I've got to get him. At the end of the meeting, people go forward for prayer, for loved ones, for whatever. I figured that's where God is, that's where he's going to get touched by these men. So I'd always say, honey, let's go pray for Dawn. Let's go pray for Rich. Let's go pray for Steve. And every meeting, he would go forward. He'd go forward with me. And at this particular meeting, and a year after I had come to the Lord, Hank, who's the president, and also the husband of the leading charismatic lady, Pam, Hank, at the end of it, as we're leaving the front of the meeting, Hank said, brother, is this the night you're going to say yes to Jesus? And Earl said, I will do it when I feel like, in my own time. I said, oh God, another month is going to go by. And we came home, and he fell on his face before the Lord. He just fell on his face, and you know, he never turned back. He never turned back. So that was in the 70s. So he came into the Lord, and my family had migrated up here from Jamaica. My mom lived close to us, and she was not a happy camper. She'd never been happy. She didn't like Jamaica. She had lived in Canada quite a few years and didn't like Jamaica. And she had gone to meetings, and she had heard about it. And even when she was in Jamaica before she came up in 77, she had heard about Jesus. And one day, it just got so bad between her and Steve. They were like, they were just like the opposite ends of a mat. Well, no, they didn't attract each other. They repelled each other. It was just awful. And I just sat her down on the couch and I said, Mom, no, you're gonna say the prayer now. You're gonna give your life to Jesus. She says, okay. And oh, really? So she said the prayer, and Mom changed. It is a life-changing thing that happens. She changed so much that was in the summer. Every winter she'd go down to Florida to my two brothers and their wives. And my sister-in-law, Maureen, she went first to Maureen and Bobby, and Maureen didn't think she could take Mom another year because Mom was so miserable, so difficult to live with. Maureen was not a believer at that point. She had a believing neighbor who said, I'll pray with you. And I told Maureen something had happened, but Maureen didn't, and that Mom had changed. She didn't believe me. When Mom came to visit her, Mom went on her knees before Maureen and repented.
Wow.
That's what I'm sure that's the story Maureen told me. She was so changed. That eventually changed Maureen's heart. And she came to the Lord. So that's my mom, and so we got to the end of the 70s, and my sister was up here with us from Jamaica, and she needed Jesus. And on Good Friday of 1980, she was going to a little Wesleyan church, and she came out and was driving home, and there's a cross in the sky, and she gave her life to the Lord. She later became a missionary. And that same weekend, Dawn, at Easter Day, Dawn was up in the mountains somewhere of Connecticut. Yeah. So Earl and I, after church, we told her we're coming up to see her, take her to lunch for Easter. And when we got there, she told us she had been walking by the lake, came to know Jesus. And we went down, that year, there was a big Full Gospel Businessman Convention in Philadelphia. And I'm always finagling ways to try to get, always, all my old family to the Lord. And the men in my family were big baseball fans. And the All-Star game was in Philadelphia. And they said that from the convention they'd take the youth to the All-Star game. So we said to Steve, Steve, come with us and you can go to the All-Star game. Well, we made all the arrangements to go, and they had a strike. There was no All-Star game. So he came anyway. But he wouldn't go with us. He wouldn't go. We told him where the youth convention was. He wouldn't go. So we said to him, hey, you could come and have some fun. We're going. You want to stay in the motel room, you can. So we went to the convention. It was close to the site of the convention that the motel was. We went, and when we came back, Steve had gone to the youth convention and accepted Jesus.
Wow.
And it was a pastor a young man from California spoke, and he spoke on purity, staying pure before marriage. Well, that was a thing that got Stephen. He bought the tape, those old-fashioned tapes. He bought the tape, and he was going to take it home to Richard. That was the last one in the family. Richard had to hear this one. I don't think Richard listened to it. So he came to the Lord that year, April. Oh, yeah, I guess. But we went to, I'm not sure that the timeline, because then we went down to Washington for Jesus.
That was 80.
Yeah. And you got baptized in the Holy Spirit. You went to the young people.
Youth convention.
Youth convention, yeah.
Yeah.
So Stephen may have... All-Star game was in the summer. That's what it was. So Stephen came to the Lord in the summer. And Richard had gone to college 2 years before and been a playboy for a whole year. And Earl told him, I'm not paying. I'm not paying for any more college for you. You need to take a year off and grow up. So he took a year off, which was the best thing happened to Richard. And then he applied to a college in Lindsborg, Kansas. Uncle Jim had and that was his aunt's husband, had known about the college. So he went off to Lindsborg, Kansas. We didn't even know where it existed. He went off in his car, and he's New York Easterner, goes to the Midwest. And when about a month after he got there, he calls and wants to talk to his dad. Dad, what does it mean to be the spiritual head of a relationship? Well, Earl almost fainted. Earl says, well, what do you mean? I don't know. He says, well, I met this girl, and I like her, but she says that she has to date only young men who are going to be spiritual heads of the relationship. So Earl explained to him, says that, okay. But he went, so he's working on this now. So he goes to an Imperials concert with, I guess this girl with kids from the college anyway. And they gave an altar call, and he said, I'm going to, this is my memory of it, okay, my recollection. He said to himself, well, I'll wait till I go back home at Christmas to go to church with Mom and Dad and do this. And he said the next thing he knew, he was up front. So that was I think in 1982, 81 or 82, maybe 80. So by 1982, my whole family had come into the Lord. And he met Chris, whose mother was a strong believer, Joyce. And Joyce just loved her. He just adored Richard. And that's what Richard needed. And So we had Chris. They got married in '82. Yeah.
Or 80.
Yeah, because
Yeah, 82. Yes.
and Dawn was married in '82 also.
Yeah.
And Sam, she met Sam, and he wasn't a believer. So we gave him a book by this
Sir Lionel.
Sir Lionel something.
Something from England, a barrister.
Yeah, he was really brilliant, and he explained the whole gospel, because Sam was like a genius, and he thought a lot. And Sam came to the Lord because Dawn said to me, "Mom, I'm getting married. We're getting married in January 28th. This was just before Christmas, I think."
Yeah.
And Sam is not a believer. What am I going to do? I said, "Well, Dawn, he's just going to be a believer before you get married, that's all." I had such faith in those days. God said it, that's me and my family. And he did. Remember that?
Thanksgiving week.
Thanksgiving week, that's what it was, yes.
1981.
Yeah. So that was the same year that Stephen came and Richard came to the Lord.
And then I recommitted my life that same weekend.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, with Grandma at the Episcopal Church.
Yes. Grandma and my mom invited Dawn
Yeah.
to come to a renewal weekend at the Episcopal Church. I didn't think they had many of them, but they had one that you came to, and she recommitted her life.
Yeah.
So by 1982, they were all in. And Richard got married in '82 also. Yeah. Stephen went off to ORU the winter of '83. Jet lag. It was, yeah, he graduated '82, then took the fall off, and then he went, in the middle of the year, he went to ORU. Yeah, and so that's, it just continued because now my brother, Maureen, that I talked, Maureen, who's Bobby's wife, Maureen just talked to her kids, and both Steve and Christopher came to the Lord, and Bobby came to the Lord, and Steve and Christopher are strong believers, married to a strong believing family. Stephen married Stacy, and Stephen met Stacy in after they both graduated from ORU. She was a nurse, and he graduated in accounting. And in '88 or something like that, he met her. And he met her, and he called us and said, or wrote us, I guess, "Mom and Dad, get used to the name, Stacy Meyer." I was sitting in Bible study, and this most awesome girl in Bible study land walked in. I watched her. She came and sat right beside me. Stephen, at that point, decided he was going to marry Stacy. Stacy didn't think he existed, but didn't know about him. But Stephen was determined, so they got married in '89.